Affirmations are those things that they're doing or plan to do that you feel are keep on keeping on. We see what you're doing, we've looked at it, we've talked to you about it, it sounds plausible, it sounds beneficial, we want to support you. You know, one of the things that is both the nadir and the apogee of teaching is how solitary a profession it is, okay? So one of the reasons I went into teaching is that at age 22, I was master of the universe. So my parents thought that I thought that most of my teenage years. So, I learned that I wasn't. And when you have, I started in secondary school, so when you have 160 students in 5 different preps in English, you realize how little you know. And how much there is to learn. But the point being is that you have this autonomy, you have this authority, you have this responsibility, you have this opportunity for creativity and expressing yourself. And there's just so many cool things about this profession. And then at the same time, okay, at 3:30 or whenever the lights start to dim, you're like, it's just me and those papers. It's just me and those results. And if anything has happened in the 40 years that I've been in the business, is that we have built many more collaborative structures and much more endorsement of working together. But there can still be this process of, how do I know that I'm really making a difference? How do I know what I'm doing is really a good thing to be doing? So that's what affirmations are about. It's a chance for peers from different institutions, and sometimes, as we said before, from completely different disciplines, to say, that is really a neat thing you're doing. And we applaud that, and we think you should keep doing that. It may not be at the level of a commendation, it may not be something extraordinary, but it's something that is a good process. Sometimes it's one of the places the second bullet points to is that this matrix of improvement initiatives says this is what we plan to do. So you can affirm all of them, or you can affirm some of them, right? But that's a great place to look for affirmations, that you've reviewed what they say they want to do, whether it's develop an online tutorial, whether it's to develop a peer tutor program, whatever it might be. And you think, yeah, that sounds feasible, that sounds like it was work. Sometimes you can look at something like, well, we do that at our institution. So that's a place where, ratcheting forward a few weeks, when you write the report, you might even say a little bit about what we do at your own school. And say, and we've had situations where programs have gotten back in touch with an auditor and said, you said in your report that you do this kind of thing. You've developed a peer tutoring. Could I have a conversation with you about that? You really become collaborators. We've even had a couple of situations where auditors get invited back to the campus to do workshops or presentations on something that they shared at the site visit and or in the report. So look for that sense of advocacy of what they propose to do or are doing. Those are affirmations. And then the recommendations, remember we've already talked about opportunities for improvement, or OFIs. Remember that the recommendations are always phrased in positive language. Okay, so instead, you should stop doing this. Okay, halt, decease, no more. All right, you might want to say something to the effect, instead of continuing to doing this, which does not seem to be contributing significantly to the improvement of your program, you may wish to consider. All right? I mean, you really, in your heart of hearts, you want to say, stop doing this and do this. All right? But again, we're not there to be prescriptive. We're not there to run their program. We're there to kind of kind of turn the herd, just kind of massage them into a direction that might be more positive and more productive. So I remember one of my team members, one time we were doing a sociology program. This gentleman had been a sociology professor for 3 decades and chaired the sociology department. He'd forgotten more about sociology than I'll ever know. And in his report, he included all of these resources of different societies and different publications and youth organizations for improvement of a sociology program. And I was like, darn, you should charge them about $10,000 for this. I mean, this is like a consultant's fee. But it was just given generously, just because, you know, they wanted to help the other program move it down the line. So be thinking about value added. Also, think about how it adds value to student success. So how is what they are going to do add to student success? What's going to make a difference? So if you recommend something like a peer tutoring program, then you're really focusing on something that is success oriented for the students. You know? So be thinking in those lines.
Is it not helpful if we find a challenge without promoting a solution? What if we see a challenge but we're not sure the answer?
Yeah, if you see, I would say this, that I would at least encourage them to explore other processes that might be more effective, right? You may not say what those processes are. You may not have that experience. But what I'm understanding your question to be is that you're seeing something's not working.
Not quite right here.
It's not quite right here.
Either we don't have the expertise in the field, or we've not come across this problem before, and we're not exactly sure how to fix it, but this
Right.
seems to be not ideal.
Yeah, and sometimes when that comes up, it comes up from the student's point of view, okay? Early on in the process, we asked the students, tell us a little bit about one of your teachers in the program that is really exceptional. What's really, you know, that really stands out that you really, really like? And 2 or 3 of the students, you know, we, again, try to start things off in a positive, proactive manner. But one of my colleagues on the team noticed that this student in the back was not answering and wasn't making eye contact. So she said, oh, Billy, you haven't answered yet. Could you just give us one example? And he said, well, I was trying to think that, well, when my teacher shows up, and that floodgates were open. So turned out that this student was taking the class at an outlying site. The last administrator left that outlying site at 5 o'clock. Classes started at 5:30. Nobody was there to show whether or not the teacher came or not. So early on, the teacher figured it was an adjunct teacher and figured that one out. So first day of class, they gave him 3 weeks worth of homework and said, we'll meet again in 3 weeks. And no one was the wiser. So it really wasn't even you see, in that case, it wasn't even a program issue. It was really a management issue of the entire school. And we really didn't. Pardon?
That would not happen.
Would not happen today?
Second time that instructor wasn't there, I'd have had a student on my doorstep.
Yeah. Well, that's good to hear, isn't it?
I'm shy about that.
Yeah. Yeah, that may be the case, because this was every bit of 12 years ago, if there were anything.
Now, they even want to tell you how the instructors teach the class now.
Well, that's good to know.
No, it's not.
Can you imagine encountering, and can you imagine an audit team encountering issues, personality or otherwise, between faculty members?
Yes. Yes. How many, have you had that?
Oh, yeah.
To what
Yeah.
degree might you find that appearing in an audit report?
I would say not so much in the audit report, more in the face-to-face. More in the face-to-face.
So our recommendations could, among others, include
Therapy?
I like that.
duh!
Let me give you an example. Again, I got to cash through years and years and years of doing these. But again, true story. So we had a situation where, as you'll know, one of the focal areas is learning outcomes. You don't have to start from beginning to middle to end. In fact, usually what we try to do is start with one of the focal areas, go to another, go to another, go to another, come back around with your second question so that you're moving around and you're getting all of them covered. Don't just spend, you'll find if you start with learning outcomes, you could spend 30, 35 minutes on learning outcomes, you never get to assessment. You'll barely get through curriculum. So bounce around a little bit. But we did start with learning outcomes. And we really just wanted, a lot of what you do is you use, when you see something that's a real strength of a program, you use the site visit to verify, to validate that this is really the case. Well, this program, right on their website and all their syllabus, they had these masterful statements of learning outcomes. I mean, they were like right out of a SAC COC presentation. Just perfectly crafted. They had the right action verbs, the right outcomes. They were all measurable. We were like, man, this is just dynamite. So we began our question with that. We said we appreciate the information and the examples of the learning outcomes. And we just wanted to ask the question is, how did you as a faculty, and there must have been maybe 8 people in the room. It wasn't like a 25-person faculty, but it wasn't a 2-person faculty either. We said, how did you come up with these learning outcomes? What was the process that you used to come up with your learning outcomes? Well, all of a sudden, 2 people from one side of the room just started going, we did this, we did this, we did this, we did this. And you could, body language kind of gives you a little example. And I could see this one gentleman just kind of start getting tighter and tighter, and ears redder and redder, and steam starting to come out. And before we could ask another question, he turned across the room and he said, "You wrote learning outcomes for my course?" And the room got real quiet, real quiet. And that's in fact what happened, is that they did their self-study. They kind of divvied it up. You guys are going to do learning outcomes. You're going to do curriculum. You're going to do teaching and learning, you're going to do assessment, and with the idea that you're going to lead that, but you're going to engage everybody. Well, this particular learning outcome group just said, we got it. We'll nail it. And they never went out to their colleagues. They just wrote them, put them in the self-study report, and sent it in. And that was another thing we found out, is that the self-study report had not been reviewed by all the faculty members. It was written and sent in without a final review, which is not uncommon, but not necessarily the best practice. And so that clearly was an issue of a conflict. We were able to kind of calm but it was a good example, I think, of how you can have different faculty with different agenda, and maybe not even, again, this kind of autonomous responsibility that we all have in our profession was like, well, we were given the learning outcomes thing, so let's get it done. And they did, without thinking of bringing other people into the loop.
So the follow-on affirmation I might observe here is that there are some recommendations that will not appear in the audit report.
Right. Once you get to the site visit, you'll take some recommendations that are either you either see as opportunities for improvement in the self-study, or are omissions, which is the nice thing about the letter O. So they can be opportunities or omissions. It's just not there. They haven't said anything about the use of results, so I'd put a 0 there.
Such as, you're going to take that teacher and hang him.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. So, yeah, again, those things can flip-flop around. And that's why there used to be a tool called a pencil. Does anyone remember what a pencil is? They had something called an eraser on it. And so it used to be that you could use that analogy. Now you just got to say everything's written in Word, so you can delete anything. You can cut and paste. You can move a recommendation up to a commendation. You can jiggle and wiggle and move things around to where they are in your assessment at the end of the site visit. Yep. So, and again, you might come out as a team after the site visit and say, they need to do this and 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 then go, slow down. Okay? Remembering that you're often dealing, that you are always dealing with programs and faculty that have a structured responsibility. They're already busy. Okay? And to give them a laundry list of recommendations is probably just like throwing sand in the bullseye. You're just going to get them confused. So one of the things that we can do as a team is prioritize and say, and put yourself in that phase. Okay, all of a sudden you are just plucked out of whatever you're doing in life. You're now the department chair or the program coordinator for that program. What would be the 3 things that you would want to get done first and of the most importance? And give them those 3 things to chew on, all right? They can always come back to you and say, been there, done that, we're done, 2 years later, and say, what else could we do? But hopefully what you've done is you've kind of primed the pump so that if they start thinking in terms of continuous improvement, then they'll work out their matrix of initiatives, they'll go to their potential initiatives, and they'll start building a culture of what can we do better? What can we do better next? But that's why I try to reinforce the need to limit the cars. Only so many cars in a garage. So at the end of the day at the site visit, you're going to present at the exit session, and really the exit session is primarily a chance to share orally as well as in writing or electronically now the commendations, affirmations, and recommendations. Now, years ago, one of the academic audit team leaders said, we always start with the recommendations and end with the commendations. So I would change it on the list, except then it doesn't spell anything cool. But the bottom line is it makes a lot of sense because you're ending on a positive note. You're ending on a note of positive reinforcement. And also, if you think about the basic theory of what do we remember most, we remember most that which we hear last. Second thing we remember most is that which we hear first. Okay, so we're giving their commendations. We certainly want them to come away from this process feeling good about it, feeling reinforced, feeling like they've got that smiley sunshine in their rear view mirror on the way home. But then we're going to introduce those recommendations at the very beginning. They'll remember them. The affirmations are a good thing too, but I think that's just a suggestion. And once again, those of you, and again, it will be many of you, if not in fact most of you, will be doing the quality assurance funding rubric. You do, and this is something that is a difference. It was affirmed this year, and we work with the folks at THEC when we make these kinds of changes in process, and they're copied on all the things that I send you, including this presentation, including the guidebook, and all of that. Present the rubric only first of all, only if required. So some of you are doing programs that are not for quality assurance funding, so you don't have to do the rubric, and it just confuses things if you do. You can use it as a resource to build your questions and build your points of inquiry. But if it is required, then share it only if ready. And the more that I've thought about this, and even as I'm thinking through it right now, I would if I were a team leader, if I were a member of an auditor team, I would like to take advantage of a little bit of extra time before presenting the rubric, because that gives you a chance to think through it on the drive home and then get back together as a team. But if there's unity amongst you and you've scored out the rubric and everybody's happy with it, then you could certainly present it, but you don't have to. So your presentation is only going to be 15 or 20 minutes. And the last bullet is something I want to really reinforce. And the team leader needs to say this at the front end. And we've done this often enough that it ought to be quid pro quo, but it's not. So you are not to feel like you are subject to questions and contentions and explanations if you have made a particular recommendation or something of that nature. Just say that your out is this, that this is the end of the day, but not the end of the process. So you are going, as a team, going to follow up with a written report. And that's where you have the opportunity to, if you make a recommendation, for example, to improve the presentation of materials and the accuracy and the completeness of those materials in a public forum, you have a chance to write a little bit of a paragraph about that as to why you identified that and what the benefit of that would be going forward. So that's the idea of just doing this as an oral presentation and not as a kind of working session or a defense of what you have presented. Plus, it'll be late in the day. You'll want to be out of there, okay? You will have done your due diligence, and you'll feel like time to go. Couple of practical things. Again, you'll be reimbursed by the host team, by the host institution, excuse me. So they'll ask you to fill out some forms and make sure that you have a mileage report from your institution to and from, round trip, and typically receipts from the hotel. And if there's any other travel related receipts, sometimes you have a parking, whatever. Meals, kind of, you'll be reimbursed for the meals that you are not given, if you will, not provided with, which is essentially lunch the day of the site visit. So how we basically explain it to the institutions that each auditor should be given reimbursement for meals and incidentals for the day of, for 2 days of travel, the day that you go there, the day you come back. There are a couple of site visits that are going to be 2-day site visits, or they're going to require an auditor to travel halfway or 3/4 or 4/4 across the state to attend. So in those situations, I authorize an extra day of travel. So that's submitted to the host institution, and then before you all disperse, make sure that you have a plan for how you're going to complete your written report. So each one of you will have a section of the report to complete. Typically speaking, it's not written in stone. Typically speaking, it's the team leader that serves as the collator and the editor and puts together the final report. Every now and then, angels appear amongst us, and a member of the team says, "I'd be happy to do that." And that is not forbidden. So if you're not the team leader, but you're really good at writing and you like the idea of pulling everything together, you're certainly welcome to do it. Everything will always go back and through the team leader, ultimately. And then, as I said before, and Sam caught me, that these are not due until middle of May, the 11th or 12th. Either will work. So that's the whole site visit and process. Any questions about that? All right. So is everybody okay just to keep on keeping on? If you need to get up and stretch or go to the restroom, they're right across the hall here, so feel welcome to. But maybe if it's okay, we'll just keep rocking and
I
rolling.
have a bunch of questions, but I'll keep them. I mean, not hold them until,
No, hit us up now.
you really?
Yeah.
All right. I was born, in your history with audit teams, have audit team members ever requested faculty performance reviews?
No,
Okay. Just
Nope.
ask.
no, that's not something that we're interested in. What we have asked for is an explanation of the process for reviewing faculty. So things like faculty handbooks, adjunct faculty guides, that kind of thing, but not individual performance reviews.
That
But-
off limits?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Now they're confidential.
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
But again, the overarching process that they use to evaluate faculty, evaluate part-time faculty, would be well within the idea of a quality assurance process. Yeah. And just the nature of those reviews, that'll tell you a lot about the process. But as far as, we're not here to determine whether or not Joe is performing at the highest possible level, or Maria is performing at the highest possible level. That's too deep in the weeds.
Right.
If they say something to the effect in their report, that kind of thing, that it would be helpful if we had a way of requiring all of our faculty to be involved in this project, then you might want to follow, what do you mean by that? And if it is the case that, like, full-time, fully promoted faculty are exempt from faculty meetings, are exempt from committee service, whatever it might be,
Sure.
then that might be something that you might reflect upon and say, it may be to the advantage of the program to reconsider that process.
All right. Second, do programs ask for audits, or are they told they're getting them, or how's that work?
Yes and no. How
Okay,
it
so
works is
programs
this.
ask for audits.
That is sometimes the case. There are sometimes the case. This process has been along for a long time. For example, several years ago, all of the master's levels engineering programs at Tennessee Tech went through the academic audit. They were not required to do so. Okay? They were not required to do so, but they did so in preparation for their accrediting body. Okay? They did it voluntarily just to get their arms around what a quality improvement process, a peer review type process, entailed, to kind of prep them for an accrediting agency visit in a couple of years.
So TBR has occasionally asked to do audits?
TBR.
The Tennessee Board of Regents, have you contacted programs and asked if you can do audits? Or is it strictly one way from the program to?
Yep. We really respond to the needs of the campuses. So first of all, programs that are identified as degree granting programs by the Higher Education Commission must either be accredited by a regarded and acknowledged and approved accrediting agency, like an ABAT, for example, for engineering, or they must go through what's called a non-accreditable program review process. I can only say non-accreditable. Well, see, I didn't. Couldn't get it out twice. So in that venue, for example, a bachelor's of English program, you can get a baccalaureate degree in English. there's no national accrediting body of English programs. So they go through either one of two processes. They go through either a program review process or an academic audit. The program review process is basically based upon an out-of-state subject matter expert reviewer, minimum of one, who comes in and there's a rubric that they follow. The program goes through a self-study that responds to that rubric. The reviewer comes in, does an assessment, does a measurement, does the metric, and then writes a report. The academic audit is, as you can tell, it's a similar peer review process, but it is different in its construct. It's different in the way that things that we measure. So those non-accreditable programs are required to go through according to a cycle. Most of our institutions and all of our community colleges go through once every 5 years. Okay, a couple of the universities in our system have a 7-year cycle or even a 10-year cycle, but most of them are a 5-year cycle. And that's a requirement not of the TBR or of the UT system or of individual LGIs, which is local governing institutions. Those are the 6 former TBR universities. But that's a requirement of THEC. And again, it's a requirement because it's a source of additional funding, and it's part of that additional funding formula. Other times, though, for example, at our community colleges that have English programs that don't issue degrees, right? You don't get an Associate of Arts in English at a community college. If you want to be an English major at APSU or at UT Martin, you follow the Associate of Arts program, but the degree that you're given is the generic university parallel degree. So the only program, the only academic audit or peer review that the community colleges have to do for what we might call, commonly call our transfer programs, is once every 5 years a review of that university parallel degree program. For example, this year Northeast State is going through a review of their university parallel program. And that will include the sciences, the mathematics, the histories, the social behavioral sciences, the humanities, the communication courses, all together as a general education program. But several of our institutions, and this year institutions like Chattanooga State, Cleveland State, Volunteer State come to mind, Pellissippi State perhaps, go through an academic audit for the purpose of quality assurance alone, both for SAC-COC and for CQI within their program. So they don't have to. No one calls them up and say, Chattanooga State, I think you better do your English program. But lo and behold, they are doing that because that's a way that they can demonstrate continuous improvement and actuate improvement in their program.
Could I ask how many people are here for the very first time? Keep your hands up a second. Half of us?
About half of you, yeah. Yeah.
How many here are academic audit team members for the very first time? About the same folks.
Yeah, yeah. So and you're all here purposefully,
Sure.
usually from 2 venues. One, some of you have been nominated by the program itself. So each program going through the academic audit, thinking that they're going to have 3 team members, has the opportunity in the fall to nominate academic auditors to review their team. And some of you are those people. They have said, we would like such and such to be on our team. Okay? Others of you have, through your own naivete, volunteered to serve on an academic auditor team. Okay? Sometimes you're encouraged to do so by your chair or by your college. Sometimes you hear about it through a colleague and you say, that sounds cool to me. Sometimes it's because you find out that your program is going to go through next year, and it might behoove our program to have somebody go through this and see what it's like at the other end, so they can come back and say, this is what we're going to face a year from now. So there are a lot of different motivations. And so you volunteer to serve on the academic audit, and then those who are not nominated by the faculty are placed on teams, and that's one of my responsibilities. So I first place team leaders. Sometimes a nominee is someone who can serve as a team leader, and I ask them that. Other times the nominee, there's no one who's nominated who is experienced enough, and I make it that you have to be in at least your third year of the academic audit. You had to have 2 under your belt before I even consider asking you to be a team leader. And then I invite them to be the team leader, and then once I've got a team leader, and then I fill out the team with other people. I try to, there's a nice pool of people who have done this year after year after year, so I try to make sure that a team is constituted of a team leader and an experienced person and an inexperienced person, a rookie. But sometimes the program nominates 2 rookies, so that's okay. You'll learn by doing it. I think that's the case with you. So, but you've got a highly experienced team leader,
Oh, I
so
can tell.
she'll get you in shape. So, good questions.